Smuzz and suspensions. Since my brush with petty theft and the ensuing suspension in my first year, I'd not tried sagging school since. Although I had dodged serious reprimands in the following 4 years, I'd been on the receiving end of more than a few Fed bills, and I was in danger of earning a blue heritage plaque for the time I was spending in detention. It seemed I was putting in an extra hour at least once a week from the beginning of my final year. I should have been using the extra time to study and catch up on my classwork, but I spent it pretending to do that while staring out of the window and wondering what Notre Dame crumpet I was missing on the bus home. My mum had started working in Carps, a dressmaking factory off London Road, and this meant she was leaving the house half an hour after I left for school, and by the time she came home I was already changed out of uniform and in front of the telly. This meant that all I had to do was walk to the bus stop and wait until the coast was clear and return home for a day of lolling about, listening to music and eating tea and toast, or sitting in the bedroom playing my guitar. Given a choice between that and going to school, there was only ever going to be one winner. So the legendary bunk-off began during the dark mornings of January 1978. I can't say in all honesty how many days I skipped, but in total it must have amounted to about a month, at least, with the last 10 days coming in a consecutive 2-week stretch. I had Joey Beardswood for company for some of those days, but most of the time I was on my own. What was I thinking? Taking 2 weeks off from school without them receiving a letter or a phone call to explain my absence and thinking no one was going to notice. When I had skipped the odd day or two, I could always cover myself by bringing in a note from my mum, although it wouldn't have taken much toil from a handwriting expert to see the links between my scrawl and my mother's. A cursory glance would have told him the script originated from one hand. So, eventually, it all comes on top. I can't remember how my truant genius was uncovered, but I think somebody grasped me up, or at least alerted someone that I was at home in bed, swinging the lead. My parents are called up, and as I'm in my final year, it's decided that I can't be suspended for a time befitting of the crime, as I'd miss out on too much study, so I was given detention. I thought I'd got off lightly until I heard the terms of my imprisonment. I was to do the extra hour for the remainder of this term and the whole of my final term. If my blue heritage plaque were pending approval, surely this sentence would be cast iron guarantee of receivership. Bye-bye, lovely ladies of Notre Dame, and hello, hairy-arse grillers from Ford's. Detention was supervised by a different teacher every day, but all would deliver varying forms of the same banter every time they'd enter the room. "Ah, Mr. Nash, lost your bus pass?" "Ah, Mr. Nash, have you been here since yesterday?" "Ah, Mr. Nash, has your mother forgot to come and pick you up, or has she thrown you out?" They thought they were all hilarious, but Charlie Williams and Ken Goodwin were hardly shitting themselves. Some of the teachers in the school were cool, and there were times during the final stretch where one would be watching over me alone, and then sometimes the banter would extend beyond their puerile attempts at comedy. One would have thought that my interest in music would have seen me break some academic sweat during the 5 years I studied it at school, but sticking a violin under my chin and deciphering black notes on a stave was not floating me boat. In the first year, everyone wanted to play cello because that was too big to take home on the bus. If it wasn't bad enough having to wear the worst blazer in the city, you were now expected to carry a violin case with you like some pint-sized mafioso, making you look like an even bigger dickhead. The one common thread in the music we listened to in lessons was that it was all composed by dead people who'd been dead for over 100 years. I wanted to make and play music that I heard and saw on Top of the Pops. That enforced listening put me off classical music for life, and I don't own any recorded material by dead people unless you include Hendrix and Lennon. The one thing that the punk explosion had taught us was that anyone could be in a band, and that anyone could easily be myself and a few of my more musically gifted friends. So why not form a band of our own? Joey Beardswood immediately sketched himself in for the lead singer role, and I was on guitar. Like Dylan, I'd gone electric by now and was the proud owner of a white Les Paul just like my heroes. Unfortunately, my budget didn't stretch to having Gibson on the headstock, and I had to settle for the cheaper Japanese copy that said Grant. I also had an H&H Studio 50 combo to fire it from. Martin Nixon was the bass player because he was our mate and he could play bass and owned a bass guitar and amp. We recruited his brother Pete on lead guitar because he was fast and had a guitar and amp which made up for the fact that he was a bit of a specky plum who liked his heavy rock a bit too much. We borrowed Mark, the drummer from Mark II, because he was the only drummer we knew. We needed a name though. I'm sure there would have been hundreds of ludicrous names suggested, but all of them escape me now. Joey loved the Buzzcocks and suggested that we need something that had a double Z in the logo. He came up with Smuzz. A shit name, but a name all the same. It's such a shit name, I even feel embarrassed sharing that with you over 30 years later. We started rehearsing in the basement where we used to have the God Squad discos and we worked out a set. We didn't really look any further than making a noise and murdering the songs of our heroes. The Names of the Dead were Tommy Gun by The Clash, Shot by Both Sides by Magazine, Autonomy by the Buzzcocks, Wasted Life by Stiff Little Fingers with me on vocals, and No More Heroes and Something Better Change by the Stranglers, without a keyboard player. Strangely, we included Led Zeppelin's Rock and Roll as well, probably at the insistence of Pete Nixon, who was getting fucked off playing all this punk shite. I can't remember how we managed to secure it or through who, but we got a gig playing in the canteen of my primary school. 3 bands were on the bill and we were going to be in the middle. I don't know the exact details of the legend of Robert Johnson and his meeting at the Crossroads, but the day of that first performance was a crossroads moment for me. The hourly detentions were not curbing my enthusiasm for a bunk-off, and I was up to my old tricks again and preferring the company of my album collection rather than my teachers. It was a struggle to get out of bed as I'd probably been up late the night before rolling round the carpet with Lizzie Elms. I got found out again, and this time I was suspended. The day of my suspension, the same day as my first public performance outside of a church. Quite prophetic that I should say hello to rock and roll on the same day as I said goodbye to school. I didn't see me parents between suspension and stage, so I had to go home in the knowledge that the euphoria of my debut would evaporate as soon as I put my key in the front door. The gig was okay. I think Mark fucked up the snare rolls at the start of Tommy Gun, but apart from that we got from the start to the finish without too many musical calamities en route, and I enjoyed the buzz of standing in front of a crowd and giving it some welly, however limited my musicianship. I was released by SFX and told I only need return to do my exams, and, to me at least, there seemed little point in returning for them, although I did. You don't need any O-levels to jump up and down with an imitation Les Paul around your neck. How many O-levels did Steve Jones have? I guess I should use this part of the book to make reparations for appalling school behaviour and give commendations to some of the teachers who educated me despite my disinterest and disruption. Mr. Finn, a geography teacher and football fan from Middlesbrough who made a stunning impact on his debut. We all had to stand up when a teacher entered the room, and when the young Mr. Finn entered our class for the first time, we stood and remained standing for the rest of the lesson while he slowly paced the front and delivered his introductory sermon without looking any of us in the eye. My name is Mr. Finn, and I am in charge of the class. And we thought the sheep-shagging carrot crunchers talked funny. His broad northeast accent was not easy on the ear and not easy to understand, but everyone was left in no doubt that this guy wasn't going to stand for any fucking about from a bunch of Scouse ragasses. 40 minutes later he stops talking, takes the register, then gives us our homework and walks out. Legend. The line of respect was drawn and nobody crossed it. He was my teacher for 3 years, and as it turned out, he wasn't as frightening during that time as he was in that first lesson, and I don't recall him ever giving me a Fed bill. He coached me to a dear O-level. It doesn't sound like a good result, but when you see the rest of my marks, you'll think he did very well. Mr. Towie, English teacher from Manchester with a half-cool haircut and groovy boots and flares. Despite us having to learn Shakespeare and poetry, he made an effort to make it interesting, and if I have any skill in manipulating the language I was born with, then it was down to him lighting the bonfire all those years ago. If he thought I'd done a decent piece of writing, he would not just give me a mark, he would tell me how to embellish the text, and he widened my vocabulary by getting me to use a thesaurus, which up to that point I thought was something from the Cretaceous period. He coached me to a C at O level, my best mark. Mr. Gray, a portly, mustachioed languages teacher and lover of all things corduroy. I did both Spanish and French for O level, and he took me for both. While both exams resulted in a U, I did retain enough of the Spanish I learned to enable me to blow the dust off it years later and begin speaking it again. Don't get me wrong, I'm no Benitez, but I can communicate and I'm not just restricted to ordering cervezas y bocadillos. I've had several road trips across Spain in recent years and visited many places where there's no English spoken, and I've managed to make myself understood. Understanding what the Spanish is saying back to me, though, is a whole other matter. Now for the apologies, and there are only two. Mr. Hunter, a tall, thin, bespectacled biology teacher. His genteel manner led to suspicions of him being gay, but he wasn't. This led him to being named Everard after Larry Grayson's imaginary friend. I was a constant pain in his bony arse. If I wasn't attaching Bunsen burners to the water taps and firing them across the room when his back was turned, I was chipping in with some comedic comment and disrupting the class. I still remember my biggest biological crime to this day. It was snowing outside and we had biology after lunch, so myself and a few other wags thought we'd bring some snowballs inside and see if we could swat a few swats with them. Whilst we were gathering our ammo outside, I could see through the classroom window that Everard was preparing for the lesson by drawing a detailed diagram of the human heart on the blackboard. I had one snowball in each pocket of my blazer when we went back inside. One landed on the neck of a mate who hailed one back at me, and a few chuckles were rippling across the class as Everard carried on talking with his back to us and pointing to the various chambers of the human heart. I decided to include him in the fun, but he wasn't the target. Like a sniper, I waited for me moment to pull the trigger, but I couldn't wait too long as the ice was melting through me blazer. 3, 2, 1, fire. I hurled the snowball and it meets its intended target, plumb in the middle. There's now a snowball-sized hole in the heart and ice is sliding down the board, picking up chalk dust and taking out both left and right ventricles on the way to the floor. There were one or two laughs, but there was a collective drawing of breath that immediately informed me that I'd gone a bit too far. Who threw that? Silence. If I don't find out who threw that, then the whole class will be on detention tomorrow. Still silence. Nobody wanted to grass, and the guilt I was feeling from the glances of both teacher and class meant I had to put my hand up. I have to go to see the head, who can't give me detention because I'm booked in anyway, so I'm issued with a Fed bill for 4 and told to renew my acquaintance with Mr. Blackhurst the following lunchtime. Mr. Hunter, I apologise for the grief and, no doubt, some of the grey hairs that my attendance in your class will have caused. My O-level grade? U. No surprise there. Lastly, Mr. Manfred, a short, bespectacled mumbler who taught Latin and looked like he was an extra from Michael Bentine's Potty Time. I couldn't see the point of learning it because you couldn't order a beer and a butty in Latin, even if you were in Rome. I was the cause of constant disruption in his class. If I wasn't staring out the window towards the city centre skyline, I was humming, doodling, or taking the piss out of him. It went too far one day when he was telling another boy off and I piped up from behind my hands, "Tell him to fucking do one." I'm summoned to the front of the class and he grabs me by the scruff of the neck and tries to lift me off the floor. A non-starter as I was taller than him and he was no Jeff Capes. I dropped Latin and he was no doubt relieved that he didn't have another 2 years of putting up with me. Again, apologies are due and sincere, sir. Mea culpa. I did my O-levels and wasn't expecting there to be a queue of universities or employers waiting to enlist a child genius when my results landed in September. Fortunately for me, I'd be on the other side of the world when the envelope hit the doormat. Thanks to Freddie Laker, my sister and I were going to California.